The first thing you notice is the silence. It's not the quiet of a calm day, but the deep, unnatural stillness of a machine that has stopped breathing. This is the compressor station at Sudzha, a nondescript point on the map of eastern Ukraine. For decades, it was just another node in a continent-spanning circulatory system, a place where Russian natural gas was pressurized and pushed westward into the pipelines of Europe. But on the morning of February 24, 2022, the flow through Sudzha didn't just slow, it reversed. The physical direction of the molecules changed. Gas that was supposed to be moving into Europe began flowing back toward Russia. This wasn't a market fluctuation, it was a physiological event. The artery had just clotted. That reversal was a sensor reading of geopolitical shock. But the shock wasn't starting that day. The pressure had been building inside the pipes for over a decade. Europe's energy system had been slowly, systematically, and voluntarily making itself dependent on a single source of stability that was, itself, becoming unstable. The war didn't cause that energy crisis. The energy crisis, a long, slow-motion structural fracture, made the war inevitable. This is the energy historian, uncovering the hidden systems that power civilization. To understand why, you have to look not at the battlefield, but at a different kind of map. A map of pipelines, of contracts signed decades ago, of declining production fields in the North Sea, and of a political consensus that mistook a fragile supply chain for a permanent peace dividend. For 20 years, Europe's industrial strategy was simple. Outsource your baseload energy needs to someone else. Close your own coal mines. Phase out nuclear. Let your own gas fields deplete. And buy what you need from the giant next door, who seemed happy to sell. It was the ultimate just-in-time delivery system, but for the fundamental ingredient of modern life, the entire continent became a customer who decided to stop growing their own food and instead rely on a single, powerful neighbor for daily bread. The system worked beautifully, right up until the moment it couldn't, and that moment wasn't 2022. The first major tremor hit in the winter of 2009. A pricing dispute between Russia and Ukraine led to the complete shutoff of gas flows through the main pipeline for 2 weeks. In the depths of January, parts of Southeast Europe simply ran out of heat. Factories shut down. The crisis was resolved, but it revealed something terrifying. The entire architecture had no redundancy. There was no plan B. Europe's response, however, was not to diversify. It was to double down. The logic was seductive. If the problem was Ukraine as an unreliable transit country, then bypass Ukraine. Build new pipelines directly from Russia to Germany, under the Baltic Sea. Make the dependency more efficient, more direct, more secure.
That project was called Nord Stream. Its expansion, Nord Stream 2, was the ultimate expression of this faith-based energy model. It was a multi-billion-dollar bet that geopolitics could be permanently suspended by mutual economic interest. The pipeline wasn't just infrastructure, it was a theology, a belief that the gas would always flow because it was too valuable to both sides to ever stop. But theologies require stable gods, and the Russian state was undergoing a profound internal transformation, one where energy exports were no longer just a source of revenue, but the primary instrument of national power and regime survival. The customer was thinking in terms of efficiency and price. The supplier was thinking in terms of leverage and sovereignty.
Here's the thing about leverage. It only exists if the other side has no choice. Throughout the 2010s, Europe was systematically removing its own choices. Germany, the industrial heart of the continent, shut down its nuclear fleet after Fukushima. The Netherlands, sitting on one of Europe's largest gas fields, began drastically cutting production at Groningen due to earthquakes, choosing to import gas rather than extract its own. Across the continent, coal plants were shuttered, and investment in liquefied natural gas terminals, which would allow gas to come by ship from anywhere in the world, lagged. Every decision made sense in isolation. Each was a step toward a cleaner, more integrated, more efficient system. But together they engineered a colossal structural vulnerability. The system now had one pressure valve, the price of gas traded at the Dutch Title Transfer Facility, the TTF. For years, that price was low and stable. It gave the illusion of a permanent condition. But price is just a signal of balance between supply and demand. When the system has no slack, any small disruption doesn't cause a gentle price increase. It causes a parabolic spike, and the spike started coming long before any tanks moved. A cold snap in the winter of 2018. A series of maintenance issues on the Norwegian gas network in 2021. Each time, the TTF price would rocket upward, then settle. These were stress tests, and each test showed the system operating right at the edge of its capacity. Then, in the summer of 2021, the prelude began. Russia started to withhold gas. Not all of it, just a portion. It blamed maintenance. It cited contract disputes. It slowly, methodically, began to not refill the European storage facilities that had been drawn down over the winter. This was the crucial move. Europe's gas storage is its seasonal battery, its buffer against winter demand. By autumn, storage levels were at historic lows for that time of year. The market saw it. The TTF price, which had been around €20 per megawatt hour for years, shot to over 100. Then, 150. Industries that used gas as a feedstock, like fertilizer plants, began to shut down. The energy crisis was already raging, in economic terms, 6 months before the invasion. This is the counterintuitive heart of the matter. The war is often framed as the cause of the energy crisis, but from the perspective of the system itself, the energy crisis was the precondition for the war. A Europe that was energy secure, with diverse supplies and robust storage, would have been a fundamentally different geopolitical actor. It would have presented a cost to aggression that was astronomically high. But a Europe that was already shivering, with factories closing and prices spiraling, was a Europe whose resolve could be tested. The vulnerability was an invitation. The war didn't break the energy system. It was the final, violent exploitation of a system that had already broken itself. The dependency was so total that it inverted the normal logic of sanctions. When the invasion came, and the West responded with financial warfare, it immediately faced a devastating countermove: the weaponization of the very energy flows Europe depended on. The sanctions were designed to cripple the Russian economy, but the gas curtailments threatened to cripple the European one. It was a checkmate move that had been set up on the board years in advance. The pipelines were turned off, one by one. Nord Stream 1, that symbol of interdependence, was reduced to a trickle, and then, mysteriously, ruptured. The price signal went insane, hitting over €300 per megawatt hour. The market was no longer pricing gas, it was pricing survival. The frantic scramble that followed was the proof of the original sin. Germany, in a stunning historical pivot, reopened coal plants and scrambled for floating LNG terminals. Countries renegotiated deals with dictators they had previously shunned. The entire green transition timeline was thrown into question. The cost was measured in trillions of euros of wealth transfer, deindustrialization, and a brutal inflation crisis that ripped through the global economy. One material now decided the fate of nations. Not tanks, not troops, but molecules of methane. This pattern isn't new. It's a recurring script in the history of industrial civilization. Go back to 1973. The narrative is that the Arab oil embargo caused the oil crisis. But look closer. In the decades before, the West had made the same bet, outsourcing its energy security to seemingly reliable, cheap suppliers in the Middle East. It built its car-dependent suburbs, its interstate highways, its entire way of life, on the assumption that the oil would always flow. The Yom Kippur War was the trigger, but the vulnerability was homemade. The embargo didn't create the dependency. It exposed it. The crisis was already baked into the design. The same structural logic played out in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution, and again in 1990 with Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. Each time, a geopolitical shock hit a system that had optimized itself for efficiency and low cost at the expense of resilience. The shock reveals the fragility, and a frantic, expensive rebuilding begins until memory fades, costs rise, and the cycle of re-optimizing for efficiency starts all over again. We mistake the trigger for the cause. We blame the match, not the tinder we piled high around our house. So what do we learn from this recurring fracture? The real tension isn't between war and peace or between one supplier and one consumer. It's between two different conceptions of time. Market and political time is short-term. Quarterly reports, election cycles, budget years. It seeks the cheapest, most efficient solution now. But energy infrastructure time is long-term. Pipelines and LNG terminals take a decade to build. Gas fields deplete over 30 years. The climate changes over a century. When you align a civilization's long-term survival needs with short-term optimization logic, you build in a catastrophic lag. You become reactive. You become fragile. The war in Ukraine is the latest, most violent manifestation of this lag. It showed that energy is not a commodity like any other. It is the physical foundation of sovereignty. To outsource it is to outsource a piece of your capacity to exist as an independent state. The European project now faces its ultimate stress test. Can it build a new energy architecture diverse, resilient, and sustainable fast enough to outpace the next shock? Or will it, once again, when prices fall and memory fades, drift back toward the seductive efficiency of a single, convenient pipe? Most people assume that in a modern conflict, the side with the most advanced weapons wins. Drop your answer below. I'll break down why they have it backwards in the next episode. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. The hidden infrastructure is always there. Now you know where to look.